Welcome to the Zero Breach Zone, the ultimate podcast dedicated to safeguarding K-12 schools from cyber threats and beyond.
I'm Andy.
And I'm Phil, your co-host guiding you through the intersection of cybersecurity and education.
Each episode, Phil and I will dive into conversations that matter, breaking down the latest cybersecurity challenges that schools face.
And we're not doing it alone. We'll be bringing some experts in the field from the edtech world and beyond for interviews, getting their take on the most pressing issues.
Plus, every episode will wrap up with a recurring segment, The Parting Tool, where we'll share a top tip or tool that you can start using immediately to stay ahead of breaches, phishing, and everything in between.
So, welcome to the show. We're thrilled to have you here with us. Let's not just listen, but let's take some action. Connect with us on LinkedIn and other socials and join the conversation. Together, we can build a strong community dedicated to protecting our schools. Good morning, good evening, good whenever you're listening to our show. This is Phil Hintz with the Zero Breach Zone. You're back with us today with a new episode, and we are excited today. This happens to be recorded during Teacher Appreciation Week, and so as I have here, teachers are magic. Teachers are magic in lots of ways in our classrooms, and we want to do a shout out to our teachers. Thank you for all that you do, and without you, no other profession could possibly exist. So we thank you for your endeavors that cause our world to keep moving. So thank you so much. And we always, on the Zero Breach Zone, try to do our best and offer opportunities and education. We are teachers ourselves here, and we try to teach about cybersecurity in that realm and how we can keep our data safe. Lots of things have been happening in the educational world with technology and cybersecurity recently. I will go more into that, and I'm sure in other episodes, but never a dull moment in cybersecurity world. As I mentioned, I'm Phil Hintz. And
I'm Andy Lombardo. I'm a director of technology in East Tennessee, and your lovely co-host on Zero Breach Zone.
How about it? Awesome. You may have noticed, our audience, that there's another face on here, and we're privileged to have Brian Parton with Zelvin Security. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so I got to know Brian recently this past year through some pen testing services that his company did for our school, and he was our dedicated pen tester. And so as we were going through that process, Brian did just to the teacher point, Brian did a great job of walking us through what was going on, teaching us what he was doing, showing us findings, showing us what they meant, showing us things about how to remediate and what we should pay attention to. Going through that process with Brian, I thought it would be a natural fit to invite Brian on the show and have him with us. Thank you for
some of our
joining.
Listeners.
You know, when you talk about security is a huge domain, and there's offensive, there's defensive, there's a mixture of the two. And when someone says, I work in cybersecurity, the surface of what they could be talking about is infinite. Brian, do you want to give us a quick kind of definition of how you approach what pen testing is for the uninitiated?
Sure. Yeah, pen testing is short for penetration testing, and there's a few different kinds that you can do. External pen testing, internal pen testing. But overall, it's just trying to emulate attackers and determine if there are any exploitable vulnerabilities. Are there ways to break into the environment, or if someone's already in the environment, what can they do? So it's finding as many vulnerabilities as you can at every layer of defense.
Cool. So that, first of all, that sounds like a fun kind of activity. Basically, you're getting paid to be a hacker with permission to help people.
Yeah, basically. It differs a little bit from red teaming, which is another security term, in that with red teaming, you're trying to be a little bit more secretive and quiet. Pen testing can be very noisy. We're not trying to stay hidden. We're actively trying to exploit as many things as possible in order to provide the most value. At the end of a pen test, you want to know everything that you're vulnerable
when you say
to,
red
not
teaming,
just
it makes me feel
what you didn't get
like a
caught.
secret shopper almost. You're doing it in the back, or undercover boss maybe is another way to look at it. But, you're very alert in what you, and that's good. I remember
Right.
we do another company, but I think good practice to. In fact, I'm looking at Zelvin as good practice to bring in another company as a check and balance to see the work of the first company, and see if the second company different than the first, see the same thing. That's fine. That offers, validation. But if they see something different, then it's can balance, and it's a good opportunity to fine tune and look and those extra holes that might be there you weren't aware of. And so I'd rather have the undercover boss come back and expose some of those things that can ultimately in our protection processes.
Yeah, it's a great practice to compare vendors, and it benefits us as well because if a school comes to us and they're like, hey, we've been pen testing with XYZ company, we like this, we don't like that, we take that feedback into consideration. We think we compare pretty good to our competitors. We try to use that to benefit ourselves and the school. It's really a win for everyone. At the end of the day, you get multiple perspectives. Different people do testing differently. So definitely good to switch it up every now and then and get another point of view.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so one thing I was just thinking about is if we had to define what pen testing is, what we're talking about in framing that conversation, how did you land in penetration testing? Because it's not something like, kids are in school saying, I'm going to train to be a pen tester when I grow up. How did you stumble on that path?
Yeah, great question. So I spent a couple of decades in the mobile telecom industry and did a lot on the network engineering side. Really loved that space. Was kind of interested in security all along, but never fully committed to pursuing it. And then one day, let me back up, the internal penetration testing team at the company I worked for had an opening, and the knowledge that they needed on that team was with my background. So I didn't know pen testing at that time, but I did know the things that they wanted to break into. So I had that insider knowledge, and they're like, "We'll train you to be a pen tester." And so since then, it's just been years of full blast information to the face on like how to break into things, and it's been a huge rush. It's definitely a field that you have to constantly learn every single day. Things change way too rapidly. But yeah, it was great being able to jump into pen testing without going through the typical path that most people take, where they start off on the blue team or the defense side, configuring firewalls or looking at alerts and tracking down various incidents. Being able to skip that and go straight to the attacking side is a little bit of a different approach. So I've kind of learned the blue team side along the way.
Oh, you brought up how rapidly
Right.
things are changing, and that you have to, continuing education is obviously a key point for your job and your role. How has AI impacted that rapidness, if you will?
My answer today may differ from tomorrow because that's how quick it's changing. There's a lot of hype on it. Just reading the headlines, you would think that AI is going to hack everyone tomorrow. That there is some potential there. What I really see gaining traction are expert assisted AI tools. So tools that have been coded to work with various AI agents, and you've got a pen tester or an expert in whatever you're trying to accomplish guiding those tools. So you work hand in hand with it. The AI typically needs redirection at various steps in the process, but right now that seems to be the thing that is applying the most impact, especially with various software exploits with code development. On that side, I think that things are going to change in that there's going to be a lot more vulnerabilities discovered. I don't know how much the attackers are going to be using it today and tomorrow, but definitely in the coming years, they're going to pick up that same skill set.
So the way you mentioned kind of using the AI as a force multiplier to be able to do their job more effectively, do you see any kind of place in the penetration testing field for automated pen testing? So I know I've started to see advertisements and things for companies that are pitching instead of paying all the money for a human in the loop pen test, you can just sign up for an automated service. How is that impacting the industry?
So that is better than, say, just a vulnerability scan. And a lot of times we have to educate our clients into realizing a pen test is a lot more than a vulnerability scan. That may be the first few hours of a pen test just to see what the attack surface looks like. But yeah, pen testing is very manual. And so when you look at tools that are trying to automate that, they are moving a lot faster than a human can, but they're really only looking for and exploiting the things that are known. So they're looking at known patterns, known situations, and what to do in that. So they can be effective in common attack techniques and scenarios like that. But when it comes to finding a vulnerability and maybe it's configured in a weird way that doesn't work with various default settings of tools or whatnot, AI may get hung up on that and not be able to fully exploit it, whereas a human can understand, like, oh, well, it gave this error, I understand why, or I can research why and get around that and show to the client that, hey, this risk is real. We can fully exploit it, where as an automated tool may give you a false sense of security. It's definitely better than a vulnerability scan, but it's still not going to replace me.
So maybe as a district on this journey of, when I started out in my position, like a lot of districts, security was a bolt-on, other duties assigned basically. And so a lot of districts are on that kind of journey from no cybersecurity posture to a more mature posture. What would that, if you were talking to a district that was just getting started, it was a brand new tech director, didn't have a background in security, no security team, would you have any kind of advice for them on how to ramp up and what they should focus on first?
It differs quite a bit, but in general, I would say start with a really strong password policy for your staff. Obviously, younger students, you are going to have to be a little bit more lax on, but you want a strong default password policy, and then you can make exceptions for that for certain groups, like the younger students. You want to make sure that your admin accounts are completely separate from your day-to-day user accounts, have that separation of privileges. When an attacker gets into your environment, they're going to try to take any credentials that are being transmitted across the internet and use those to their advantage. If your normal day-to-day user account has full domain admin controls, then an attacker may be able to use that to their advantage. Whereas if you have that in a separate user admin account that you're only using when you need that privilege, the opportunity is much less for an attacker to take advantage of that. Reducing opportunities is another big thing, but also putting in some type of monitoring and alerting. So here recently, I'm seeing more and more districts fully deploy various EDR software, endpoint detection and response. Those are really good at correlating attacks and monitoring for different network poisoning scenarios. I've seen those be really effective. It's not exactly what I like to see when I start a pen test, but I know that it is going to be very effective. Definitely look into EDR if a district doesn't have that. Beyond that, once you've got some basic monitoring and alerting in place, looking into pen testing would be probably the next step to kind of test where your security controls are at. And that's really the perspective that we take when we're talking with a client that's never had a pen test before. Is like, okay, well, where are your security controls? And we want to help you improve those.
I remember penetration. And like you had already suggested, X testing, trying to get in from the outside, but then, we're a high school. We are teaching computer science. We are, teaching AP cybersecurity in our district as well. So we've got some young hackers, if you will. There's some students that are out there that are running to make a name for themselves and really test their skills with the things that we're training them on, right? And so internal pen testing is just as important to know where the vulnerabilities are on the inside. And I remember when we did that in our we actually I think it was a vote of confidence. It wasn't until we opened up a number of things, because our pen tester was trying to get in and couldn't do it, and said, okay, you need to be a little more lax on some of the firewall settings and whatnot, because we can't even do our internal pen testing that we need to be able to do, And so it was nice that they told us we had to open some things in order for them to complete the test that they need. Like I said, it was a vote of confidence. It means that we have a lot of major holes, the typical holes, plugged up enough. Even a pen tester is asking for a little more laxness. Do you find that in other districts at all, or what do you see?
Yeah, I do. There's a lot of times that I can get
Uh-huh.
accused of cheating because I'm like, hey, I need you to reduce this control or allow me past that. But as I mentioned earlier, we like to a pen test to be very noisy. We're not trying to be hidden, and we want it to be valuable. So we want to find vulnerabilities at every layer of defense. The analogy that I like to give is if a bank hires a locksmith and they want to test their
Yeah.
main bank vault, but yet they've got the front door locked and they won't let him in. The front
Yeah.
door lock might be great. He might not be able to get past that. You still don't know what the security is of your vault. So you have to let him pass the front door in order to see what other layers of defense exist and what vulnerabilities or risks exist with those. So yeah, we do get past various controls. So that it could be relaxing a firewall policy, or it could be, in a lot of cases, dialing back some of the EDR controls. Sometimes they have some proactive defenses where they'll just completely isolate a host from the network. We aim to not provide any network or server impacts when we do pen tests. So disabling those, some people consider cheating, but really we want to do it without causing impact and finding what vulnerabilities exist beyond that.
Security is like an ogre, right? An
Yeah,
ogre, as they say, is like an onion. It has many
yes.
layers to peel
Yep.
back. So,
And what you
Exactly.
mentioned about the
cool.
impact too, so trying not to impact infrastructure and disrupt things. I know
Hmm.
even myself, the first time I was going about engaging a penetration tester, I was very nervous as a school. I was very hesitant to take that next step for a lot of reasons. But how do you approach people who are maybe skeptical that they don't think they need a pen test, or maybe they're not ready for a pen test? What kind of reassurance or kind of pep talk do you give them to ensure that they're going to get value out of it?
Really, it's about asking the questions about their defensive controls. So once we find out, okay, you've got A, B, and C in place, that's great. And then provide a little bit of insight into how our testing works. I can go ahead and tell you, okay, for an external pen test, we probably won't be able to break in. It sounds like you've got a really strong firewall policy, you're on top of this and this. But hey, we're also going to do some OSINT, some open source intelligence gathering, and see what's out there on the dark web. Maybe there's some credentials that got breached through a third party. We'll see if those exist out there, and if they are, can we use those for anything? And then internally, we'll take a look at what defenses are in place and we'll let them know, okay, we think we're going to get caught by this, and you should get these alerts. But by the way, we know a way to get around a couple of those, so we can test that for you. So that's typically the way we approach it, is more collaborative. It's more, let me understand your defenses and I'll apply my attacks to that and show you what we can test and what the outcome would be to benefit you.
Yeah, and I'll say in our case too, one of the things I was really pleased with, it was maybe not what I intended going in, but was that validation of tools. So like the things that we have purchased and things we've invested in and spent money on, it was really good validation for us to see when it did catch you doing something. It was like, oh yes, that was money well spent. If that was a real attacker, we would know about it at this point. But that's another really great use for penetration testing, is just to validate your current spend on tools.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. In addition to validating the tools and making sure that they're working correctly, after a pen test, we offer something called purple teaming. So we've brought up red teaming and blue teaming, red being the attackers, blue being the defense. And when we work collaboratively, we call it purple teaming. So in real time, I can set up an attack and the defenders can be on the call with me, and we can make sure that those alerts do trigger how they're supposed to.
Okay, cool. I hadn't heard of that term, so that's cool.
So as you're going through testing with schools, what are some of the most common findings that you look for? Are there findings that you're like, going in, you're pretty sure that a school district is going to have XYZ finding?
That's a great question. So each environment is very unique. I would say with schools, I see a split between various on-prem devices and servers and services and cloud services. The students are more geared toward the cloud services. The on-prem stuff, typically it's things that kind of follow human behavior. So weak password policies or default passwords still existing on different network devices such as printers, things like that. Schools don't have unlimited time and resources. They're very tightly constrained. If a printer broke in the middle of a busy time of year. Maybe it wasn't configured with all the recommended security settings. You really need to pay someone to get in your network and find all of those little things in order to know where they exist and fix
So, and
those.
we talked earlier about that creativity of the pen tester, and you just brought up printers. What is, so say there's a finding on a printer, say it's left with default credentials or something like that. That may not be something that would filter up to a tech director as a critical issue, but what are some kind of things that could happen, say like a worst case scenario if there's a printer with default credentials and someone's on the network?
Yeah, and that varies quite a bit. So typically printers don't get a ton of attention because it's just a printer, maybe a copy, fax, email, device, etc. At a basic level, just default settings, there's really not a whole lot that can be done. But once that printer is configured to be a little bit more useful on the network, say it does have a scanner function where teachers can scan the email documents, now that printer has to be configured with an email account. If it needs an address book, it's going to have to be configured with LDAP to be tied into Active Directory or some other directory service. Those things require credentials. So if I can get on a printer as the local admin, there's a pretty good chance I can coerce that printer into giving up those credentials. So if that's tied to a particular email account, then I can take control of that email account. Maybe that email account has every document that's ever been scanned for the district in it. That could be huge for a ransomware or extortion gang. That's one aspect of it. Another is if it ties into LDAP, it may be a high privileged account. And those credentials could cause for privilege escalation or lateral movement within the environment. The value of the printers for an attacker can go from nothing to everything real quick, depending on what's configured within them.
That's really, really amazing. That was one of my favorite things about our engagement is where you'd bring things up that I would have thought were a non-issue or very low, and then you start walking through the steps of all the things it touches or that it impacts or that it's sharing tokens with or whatever. It was really eye-opening and educational for me going through that process as a customer.
Yeah, I can see. I mean, obviously, and I'm making a mental note now because we're in the process of all of our copiers where we use IDs. We actually have badges where you can release prints with with your badge and what have you. And our badge numbers have been expanded, so it's like we have to reprogram all of those readers to read an additional digit in the badges this summer. And I'm thinking to myself, making a mental note that, hey, while they're in there doing that, let's check for updates. Make sure all everything's been patched and firmware updates have occurred, and make sure that gets done, on an annual basis at the very least, because a lot of times printers and copiers, we'll set them up and we'll forget about them after that. They're up and running, and as long as they continue to print and do their job, nobody thinks about them anymore. We tend to not think about them like we do our computers and other devices that could get viruses, quote unquote, not realizing this is another network device that has a vulnerability. So
Absolutely. Yep.
And you mentioned leveraging LDAP to get credentials. As you're going through an engagement, and obviously getting that domain admin access is one of the big wins. Do you have a general, I don't know, like a percentage or a ratio of the number or percentage of accounts that you're typically able to compromise credentials for during an engagement?
Yeah, so most engagements are time limited. So I will only be in a target environment for, say, a week or 10 days or something like that. A real world attacker is going to be able to lay low as long as they want, typically anywhere from a few days to a few months, depending on how many other targets, for lack of a better term, they have. But within a week or so, I will typically get a handful of user accounts, and then, I don't know, maybe 60% of the time be able to compromise DA account. At that point, I'll usually create my own DA account so I can do other things, and any logs or alerts be tied to my actions with that new account. But yeah, typically it's just a handful before getting up to DA.
It's frightening.
Yeah, very real things. Wow. Well, thank you very much today for sharing. Is there other, we've been talking about penetration testing today. Are there other things that Zelvin maybe highly recommends or offers? I'm just curious, since you're on and you're representing Zelvin Security as well.
Yeah, we do have some free resources for K-12 schools. If you go to zelvin.com/K-12 resources or just zelvin.com, and at the bottom we've got a link for it there. We do have a few free resources there. One of them is the return on investment of a pen test for K-12 schools. We also have a document that speaks to the purple teaming that I'd mentioned. We've got some guides on how to streamline the procurement process. Several districts are part of a cooperative purchasing program, and we work with them to kind of speed up that procurement process. And then also at the top of our site, there's a service for password cracking that we offer. And there's a little tool on that page where you can check your password entropy, which is just a measurement of how random your password is. The higher the entropy, the harder it is for us to crack. And you want to aim for a base entropy of something over 100. So you can type in not your actual password, but just count the number of lowercase characters, uppercase, number symbols, and the length of it, and it'll calculate kind of what a base entropy is and give you an idea of whether or not you've got a moderate or weak password.
Oh, that's good. And so typically, Andy, we on the show here, our audience knows that typically do parting tips of the week. So would this be your parting tip that you would be sharing with us?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I just had one more, and it's kind of a loaded question since I know a little bit more about some of the things that you're involved with. But you mentioned earlier your path to cybersecurity and penetration testing was non-traditional, but semi-non-traditional because you were in another domain in networking and made that leap. And so as people are either kind of making a career transition to cyber, or if it's a student that's up and coming, and we've all identified the students in our schools that are being our beta internal penetration testers, what kind of community and resources and things like that should they try to work on plugging into to be able to find those opportunities and meet people?
Yeah, great question. Fortunately, the information security community is all about teaching others. And it doesn't matter if you're on the offensive or defensive side. Most medium to large towns have some group that meets periodically. Here in town, there's a local DEF CON chapter that I run called DC 865. We meet every month and have a talk, do some professional networking, swap tips and stories and such. There's also an OWASP Knoxville group. OWASP is more toward web security. Web pen testing is a whole other service that we could spend an entire podcast on. But there's a group for that. Yeah, tons of local groups. But typically, if you look for a DEF CON group, either DC and the area code or OWASP and the town name, you'll find those.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's another great tip for our listeners. I had no idea about, so yeah, we're going to have to tap into that with our team as well here. Well, as usual, we've had a wonderful guest here and a great opportunity to learn about you, Brian, as well as the product you stand behind here and the obvious necessity of pen testing. If districts are not doing this, I highly recommend it. You need to know what you don't know, bottom line, and there's only one way to do that, and that is to have somebody from the outside looking in and being able to identify those things. I know because we do it, it's another. Believe it or not, another checkbox that we can check off on our cybersecurity insurance applications out there that we do this, and so you mentioned return on investment. That's really what it is. If we're investing in this annual pen testing, then the return is we qualify for some lower rates on our cybersecurity insurance. So as well as being more resilient as a district, which is I think is the ultimate goal, right? To protect our student information, to ultimately create a zero
breach
zone.
So there you go. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate you adding to that mix there. That's how we always close our show. Thank you, everybody, for listening today, and stay tuned for more Zero Breach Zone in the future. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Zero Breach Zone podcast. We hope our conversation left you feeling more informed and empowered to protect our K-12 schools from cyber threats.
A big shout out to our sponsor, CyberNut, for making this podcast possible. CyberNut is committed to providing security awareness training designed for schools, helping educators and students navigate the digital world with confidence.
If you want to learn more about how CyberNut can help strengthen your school's cybersecurity defenses, head over to their website, cybernut.com, and sign up for their training program. Together, we can create a safer online environment for everyone in our educational communities.
And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Connect with us on LinkedIn to join the conversation and help us build a strong community around cybersecurity and education.
Join us next time on the Zero Breach Zone for more insightful conversations. Stay vigilant, stay ahead, and let's keep our schools a
Zero
breach
Zone.